Welcome to another episode of the Trivia Power Hour Gaming, the show where we look at gaming, secrets, Easter eggs, facts, and trivia you want to know about. If you know of any more trivia, or have a game, series, or developer you want me to cover, let me know in the comments, like the video, and consider subscribing. Also, make sure to stick around to the end, where I'll announce that the focus of the next episode will be. But, for now, let's get right into the trivia. Today, in anticipation of the release of Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, we're looking at the career of Koji Igarashi, aka Iga, the father of the Metroidvania genre, sometimes even referred to as Igavania. Plus, we'll make a few stops along the way to point out some fun pieces of trivia and secrets along the way. Igarashi was born in 1968 and was the son of a lumberjack. He had ambitions to be a carpenter until, at age 10, he encountered his first video games, Pong, and later Crazy Climber. From that point on, his dreams shifted to becoming a game designer, leading him to teach himself BASIC as well as assembly language so he could design his own game prototypes. After graduating college, he would accept a position at Konami as a programmer. His first assignment was on a business simulation game inspired by Fire Emblem, though it was cancelled before completion. While working on a dating sim called Takemi Memorial as programmer and writer, he would meet his future wife, who was working on Castlevania Rondo of Blood at the time, which he spent his breaks playing builds of. After completing work on Takemi, and with no desire to continue work on that series, Iga was allowed to join the Castlevania team. Just like his first project at Konami, Igarashi's first Castlevania project, intended to be released on the 32X, was cancelled due to the console's failure and a shifting focus on the PlayStation. This made his next project, and first released Castlevania game, Symphony of the Night, or Nocturne in the Moonlight, as it was titled in Japan. Initially working as a scenario writer and programmer, the original director was given a promotion during the game's development, which allowed in turn for Iga to become the assistant director to finish the game. To date, it is the only one of two games he had a directorial role in, with the other being the next project he worked on, Elder Gate. Players may have noticed that the game's pause and inventory screens are fairly basic, especially the outlines being simply white lines, which is somewhat at odds with the aesthetic of the rest of the game. It turns out these screens were intended to have a more gothic style, though time constraints preventing them from being implemented, resulting in the development frames being used in the final release. Iga remarked that the experience taught him to use more finalized designs even during development going forward. Iga was very proud of how the final product of Symphony of the Night came out, but he was not at all involved with the Sega Saturn port of the game, stating that, "I couldn't put my name on that stuff and present it to Castlevania fans." However, the pressure of following up Sonnet of the Night hit Iga pretty swiftly. After working on Castlevania Chronicles, a port of the original Castlevania, and getting ready to work on his first original follow-up game, he stated, "It's always in my mind, actually, to overcome Sonnet of the Night. From my end, Sonnet of the Night made a drastic departure from the series by adding the RPG element to the game. That was a real evolution to the franchise. We want to do something like that for the future Castlevania series. But then again, we're thinking from a business standpoint that bars to consider new challenges. I guess I need to think and find a way to make a drastic change like we did for Sonnet of the Night." Iga's next original project would be Harmony of Dissonance, or Concerto of the Midnight Sun, as it was called in Japan, in 2002 for the GBA, which he was a producer and scenario writer on. A feature Iga actually wanted to include in Symphony of the Night made its appearance in Harmony, that being the room Juste can decorate throughout the game. Alucard was at some point intended to have a room in Dracula's castle at the top of the outer wall that would have served a similar function, but was scrapped due to time constraints. Also, While it's unclear whose idea it was, someone on the team was able to sneak a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure reference into the game. When using the Sacred Fist subweapon, Juiced will shout, just like Star Platinum from Part 3. After Aria of Sorrow, or Minuet of Dawn in Japan, the second and final Iga Castlevania game on the GBA, Iga would produce and write his first fully 3D Castlevania game, Lament of Innocence. Chronologically taking place before any other game in the series, this game was simply called Castlevania in Japan. The prospect of translating Iga's Metroidvania style of gameplay into 3D seemed to be a difficult one, as he decided to change up the level design from being one large interconnected area into a more area-based design. Iga commented on the change in design, stating, "I originally came up with the original game concept having fully connected rooms, but it was really hard to understand. It's really hard to access as well, and solve the puzzles with that sort of map. I decided to break it apart into separate area maps, and keep the puzzles contained within each area. Basically, the puzzles are to be solved within the same area, but there are some items that work between areas, with the next stage or whatever." He also seemed unsure about the balance of combat and graphics in going to 3D, stating, "Let's talk about this in terms of 2D versus 3D. 2D is easier to understand. Where the monster is, where to attack, where to run, etc. 2D would be very easy to create. The graphics don't have to be very high quality because every element of the game is obvious to the player." While Iga was accepting the possibility of Castlevania becoming an exclusively 3D title going forward, he would go back to the 2D space with Dawn of Sorrow, or Demon Castle Dracula, Cross of the Pale or Blue Moon in Japan, on the DS. This game also marks another JoJo reference, where the boss Zypher can stop time and, in the Japanese version, shouts, just like Dio from the series. He would swap back to the PS2 for a second 3D game, Curse of Darkness, which was only moderately well received by critics, sitting at a 74 on Metacritic compared to Lament of Innocence's 79. Jumping back to the DS for Portrait of Ruin and Order of Ecclesia, or Demon Castle Dracula, Gallery of Labyrinth, and Demon Castle Dracula, The Stolen Seal in Japan respectively, Iga would once again go back to produce a 3D title, but one far different from either of the ones he worked on before. Castlevania Judgment was not only the first Castlevania game to be made for the Wii, but also the first 1v1 fighting game in the series. Because he wanted to utilize the unique motion controls of the system, but thought they would end up become too tiring for players over the course of a more traditional Castlevania adventure, it was decided that the game would be a fighting game. Knowing it wasn't what fans would be expecting, Iga described the idea of developing a competitive fighting game as a challenging task. Aside from Iga himself, another big name was attached to Judgment. Takeshi Obata, who was most famous for Death Note, came on as the character designer. Despite the ambitions to bring the franchise into a new genre, the game received a lot of harsh reviews from critics. The game ended up with an astonishingly low 49 on Metacritic, with everything from the art style, camera, controls, and balance being a target by different gaming outlets. It was also a financial failure as well, selling only about 3,700 units in Japan. After Judgment's failure, Iga produced his final two Castlevania games, the WiiWare title Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, a remake of the Game Boy game Castlevania The Adventure, and Harmony of Despair on XBLA and PSN. During 2011, which was the same year Harmony of Despair released, Iga was moved to Konami's Social Division, where he produced a few non-Castlevania titles, but was unable to release any titles he himself was attempting to work on. Konami's goals were shifting to the growing mobile market, and while Iga attempted to create mobile experiences that still played like console games, none were ever finished. In the end, he would leave Konami in 2014 due to the difficulties in switching over to the types of game Konami wanted, but also his desire to make the games he, and the fans of the series, wanted. The more hardcore the game, the less suitable it is for the casual market, Igarashi told Polygon in an interview at the Game Developers Conference in 2014. Unfortunately, I'm good at making core experiences, so it was 2 years of making a game that leaned too hardcore for the social market, so it was cancelled. Then I'd try again and be cancelled, and again and be cancelled. That happened several times, more because my natural style is more akin to a hardcore game. Even before announcing what he'd be doing next, Iga clearly had plans in mind, stating he'd be going out on his own to make the kind of games I really want to make, the same kind I think fans of my past games want as well. If you look at my strengths, most likely it would be an action game. Of course, fans would like a 2D exploration sort of game, a Metroidvania type game. That's definitely something I'm interested in to make them happy. Iga came back onto the scene in May 11th, 2015 with the launch of his Kickstarter for the game they were calling Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night. Inspired by the success of other projects such as Mighty No. 9, as well as the lack of interest from the 20 or so publishers he approached with the game's pitch, he and Ben Judd, who had also helped with Mighty No. 9's Kickstarter, were able to utilize the platform to show potential investors that there was a large market for the game. They asked for $500,000, which would be just 10% of the total development costs, the rest of which investors would cover. The entire production, from social media teases, the Kickstarter video, and even Iga himself streaming himself playing other Metroidvania games on Twitch before the launch with various guests, allowed the project to reach its goal within 4 hours. By the end of the first day, they had tripled it at $1.5 million raised. Before its conclusion, every funding stretch goal was reached, including getting David Hayter and Robert Belgrade, Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid series and Alucard from Symphony of the Night respectively, to voice characters in the new game. By the time the project closed, Bloodstained surpassed $5.5 million and was the highest video game project on Kickstarter up until Shenmue 3. Perhaps the project was a little too successful, as the original release date was pushed from 2017 to 2018 due to the amount of additional content that would need to be created. The second delay, from 2018 to June 18th of 2019, was to make changes based on the feedback taken from players who demoed the game at E3. The name Bloodstained was chosen to reflect the themes in the game, such as how Gothic-style games often incorporate blood, combined with the stained glass magic crystal graft from the plot of the game. While Dracula, and many of the monsters from the Castlevania series in the past, are public domain, Iga wanted to break away from those characters to fully establish a unique and original world for this game. While we have no idea what future plans Iga has in store for us beyond Ritual of the Night, there is one possible hint in a quote he gave just after leaving Konami that may foreshadow what a future project may look like. But, probably much to fans' chagrin, I'm frustrated that I have been unable to make a really good 3D game as well. That's something I want to eventually truly conquer, because it has continually defeated me. Who knows, if the Bloodstained franchise continues, the next game may be Iga's attempt to overcome that 3D hurdle he's struggled with for so long. Thanks for watching this episode of the Trivia Power Hour Gaming. Next episode, we'll be taking a look at the Yakuza series, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. In the meantime, you can check out some of my other videos you may have missed, for even more gaming trivia I know you'll like.